Did you first grow curious about the paranormal? Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to House of Asher.
And welcome to another episode of House of Asher. I'm your host, Steve Asher. This is episode 49, and some of you guys know from earlier shows I talked about a lot of the stuff growing up in the 70s and the 80s, and some of the, they're cheesy by today's standards, but when you're a kid, you know, you see like Bigfoot on $6 Million Man, or like the movie Gargoyles, for example. Really scared me as a kid, but it always stayed with me. It fascinated me, and the lore of gargoyles and things like that. And what I want to talk to you about today is I have a very special guest who's got some really cool stories, a very interesting guy, a world traveler, and just a really learned fella, Mr. David Domine. Hey, David, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Hey, it's so weird that you kind of touched on some of the things about like gargoyles and stuff. Was that just by happenstance, or is that something that you grew up interested in? How did that happen?
Well, I remember seeing the Gargoyles movie like you as well, and I was kind of freaked out. It was kind of, you look back and it is kind of cheesy, and gargoyles are one of those things I don't think really a lot of people take them seriously. So when I moved to Kentucky, I ended up writing books about the local legends and folklore and, alleged hauntings. And when I was doing that, I, met more and more people, and every once in a while I'd hear kind of a gargoyle story. And so in one of my books, I have a story about an alleged haunted church in the neighborhood where I spent many years, Old Louisville, near the downtown area of Louisville, Kentucky. And I came across a couple people who kind of swear they have seen a modern day gargoyle in the towers of this church, and so I wrote about it, and then a couple other people have got in touch with me. You don't hear about it too often, but every once in a while, like I said, you hear someone who claims they've seen a gargoyle or something that looks like a gargoyle, some kind of half human, half bat-like creature, and I think it's fascinating when I hear those stories.
Well, I knew that again, like you were talking about, we kind of grew up in that same sort of era and same sort of movies and stuff. But, I always had more of an interest in, like, the ghostly side of it and hauntings and stuff. That's why, I write about the books that I write about. But, you can't help but, like you said, hear some different legends. I had heard about where they had talked about, supposedly we have some sort of, I don't know if they consider it like some sort of Thunderbird legend or pterodactyl type creature. Because, see, I live close to the land between the lakes area here in western Kentucky, and sometimes you'll hear about, flying creatures, large creatures, and some people's like, well, it's, eagles returning and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, these are pretty friggin' big. So, but, you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt, and, people get amped up, something that's 6 foot is going to come off looking 8 foot because you're so scared, And so I don't know. It's kind of weird. I mean, when they talk about the gargoyle thing, are they talking about like an existing feature on the building that moves, or they just say this is something that appears there?
The things I hear about, it seems like it's an actual creature that just resembles the gargoyles that you find on buildings. And, I'm kind of the same way. I was always more interested in paranormal and ghosts and hauntings and things like that. But, like I said, every once in a while I talk to someone who claims they had a gargoyle sighting. And I think it's kind of funny, the Mothman, that's kind of a gargoyle kind of creature as well. It seems like every state, they have some kind of gargoyle, half human creature, and even goes back to Native Americans. They have stories like the Thunderbird and stuff you mentioned, and in Kentucky there's legends of flying creatures in the sky and things. And the one I heard about, Louisville, there's this huge limestone Gothic church. It's the Walnut Street Baptist Church. It was built in 1902, and that's as recently as 2005 I talked to someone who claimed he saw like a winged creature up in the towers of the church, and he lived in an apartment just right around the corner from this huge church, and he was able from his bedroom window, he was able to see the rooftop and the spires of this church. And he supposedly one night said he was coming out of his shower and he had like a little balcony on the side of the house that was where his bedroom was, and like this thing alighted, and landed on the railing, and he looked out and he described it as kind of a bat-like creature. And he said it had talons and had leathery skin, like features, bat-like wings, and then it like lifted up in the air and took off. And I tracked down a couple other people who had seen similar things, and their grandparents had lived there, like in the 60s and 50s, and some of these stories had been passed down. And I did a little research, and it turns out this church kind of has an interesting story. Supposedly, they had a dispute with the neighbors, and they built this church kind of as a plan to devalue all the local property. And a lot of the people on the block where the church was built ended up losing their properties, and supposedly someone put a curse on the church, and then this gargoyle-like creature kind of came to carry out the curse. And the funny thing is, it ties in with the stories of Spring Heel Jack. I assume you've heard of Spring Heel Jack.
That was actually going to be my next question about you. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like he might have turned out to be like an American cousin of Spring Heel Jack. And so like I said, I came across a couple people who swear they had seen this or their grandparents had seen this. And the funny thing is, when I did some research, it turns out in Louisville and in other parts of the state, back in 1880, in the summer, there was kind of a rash of sightings of this winged creature flying high in the sky, and people kind of described him as a half man, half bat creature. Some said he looked like a flying frog. The New York Times wrote about something that they had seen flying over Coney Island in 1880, and they said it was headed towards Kentucky. And then a day or two later, newspapers in Kentucky started writing stories about this thing that they had seen flying in the sky. And people actually they said it looked like a half man, half bat creature. Some said it looked like a man in a flying suit. In Louisville, several papers wrote about people seeing things flying over the Ohio River at that time. Some said it looked like a man in a flying machine, like a contraption. He was sitting there on a bicycle seat, and he was pedaling, and he was propelling this strange flying machine through the air over the Ohio River. So I think it's fascinating.
Well, let me ask you some
stories.
Well, I was going to ask you real quick, Dave, before I forget. For those who are not familiar with Spring Heel Jack, that kind of tied in with sort of the like the Hightower area, like the Jack the Ripper times, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah, it was. He was like a precursor to Jack the Ripper.
Right, and I understand he would do some sort of device or whatever, and he kind of had sort of a maybe not so much demonic, more of a theatrical devil look to him, and would jump up and sometimes, it would attack women. I mean, he would.
Yeah, they called him Spring. Yeah, they called him Spring Heel Jack because he was able to jump over walls, and some said over buildings. Some described him as looking like an actual creature. Some said no, it looked like he had a cape on and a funny mask, and he had a machine that allowed him to breathe flames. And there are similar sightings of that actual creature in Louisville at the same time. When they saw these things flying over Kentucky, people described kind of a monkey kind of creature bounding around in the downtown area and pinching people and stuff like that.
So strange. Which it seems like there's a lot.
The funny thing is, when they started seeing him in this area, that's when they stopped reporting him in London.
Well, I know too that there's a lot of stuff that ties in with what is known as the old Louisville area, because we had talked a little bit off air a little bit about like the Pink Palace and some of its kind of nefarious history and some of the other older buildings down there. Is there any other connections that you find between like Spring Heel Jack and the gargoyle and some of the other weird happenings? Is there any sort of triangulation? I mean, I'm not trying to get conspiracy theory on it, but let's. Is it like, okay, well, hey, if you do this, it's sort of a triangular shape between these buildings or some sort of pentacle shape or anything like that? Is it even that deep?
Yeah, I don't know about any of that. I just know that old Louisville, which they say is America's most haunted neighborhood, is just right next to the downtown area, and that's where they saw these sightings of, around here in old Louisville, they call him the Demon Leaper. So he's, the American cousin to Spring-Heel Jack, and they think he's the gargoyle-like creature that haunts the steeples of the Walnut Street Baptist Church, and that's right at the edge of old Louisville, bleeding into downtown. So it's all in basically, the same mile or two square area near the downtown area along the river where these sightings all took place.
Well, now, wasn't there also, and like I said, I'm sort of grasping at, what little memory I've still got, wasn't there also some rumors of like witches, and I'm not talking like Wiccans, I'm talking like classic cauldron type related witches and sort of Hellfire Club type related activities in that area too, sort of like.
Well, yeah, there's a famous tree at the corner of 6th and Park in Old Louisville, which is about a half mile from the church where they've seen the Demon Leaper. And it's called the Witch's Tree, and it's a gnarled and twisted tree. And according to legend, back in the 1700s, the 1800s, that's where the Louisville witches used to meet. Back then, the tree didn't look like it does today. Today it's gnarled and twisted. It's covered in burls. It has dead branches overhead. But back in the day, it was a tall maple tree. And that is where the local witches, they said, used to meet. They'd meet under the branches, they'd cast their spells, brew their potions, do the things that witches do. Went on that way for many years, but in 1889, they chopped the tree down for that year's May Day celebration. And they wanted to use it as a maypole. And we don't celebrate May 1st like they used to, but in Victorian times, May 1st was a huge cause for festivity. It was like the welcome to spring,
sure,
finally arriving. And so they chopped this tree down despite the warnings of the witches. The witches said if they stole the tree from them, there'd be a terrible price to pay, and they didn't heed their warning. They chopped the tree down. The witches went shrieking off to a new neighborhood where they found another maple tree. And before they left, they turned around and cursed the city, and they said, the head witch, her last words were, "Beware Louisville, beware 11th month." And no one paid her any attention. They danced around the maypole and forgot about her warning. But sure enough, 11 months later, they say the curse was fulfilled. And that was the day the big tornado of March 27th, 1890, destroyed the city of Louisville. And they said it was the witches hiding out in their new forest who conjured up this tornado as a way of exacting their revenge. They sent it to downtown Louisville from the west end where they were hiding out. And it came into town all along Maple Street for two miles. It was kind of a reminder of why they did this. And then it, destroyed much of the downtown, went on to neighborhoods within 4 minutes. Over like 150 homes and mansions were blown to bits. More than 100 people were killed, and a number of those killed belonged to something known as the May Day Celebration Committee, the ones that chopped the tree down in the first place. Wow. So it looks like the witches, really got their revenge. Eyewitnesses said when the tornado roared out of town, it went out along 6th Street, and when it got to the spot where the maple tree had stood, a bolt of lightning shot out from the tornado. It hit the stump of the old maple tree. There was this huge explosion, and then the tree that's there today kind of sprang up from the earth in a shower of sparks and flame and smoke to replace the tree that had been stolen from the witches. And like I said, today it's all gnarled and twisted. There's dead branches. And they say the witches have come back since then because now the tree is much better for them. It's kind of spooky like a witch's tree should be. If you ever get a chance, you go to the corner of 6th and Park. This tree is covered with charms and trinkets and beads. There's a history of voodoo people meeting there back in the day, so there's like chicken bones and voodoo dolls, gree bags, all kinds of things on the tree. It's a really interesting spot to visit.
See, that's for me. That's really like super trippy because, like I said, being here in Western Kentucky, it's a lot more like Bible Beltish, I mean, that's good and bad, I guess, but it's one of those things. I mean, when we definitely have old, things like that. We have like an area we had one of the last hangings back in the old days, when they did that kind of stuff, and lots of kind of creepy history with that and all that, and you always hear about stories of like Appalachian witchcraft and things like that, and which lines get blurred. You kind of get, people who aren't familiar, they just hear the term witch, and of course they think it's this and that when it's probably somebody who's doing holistic medicine, or it's doing, good God, Edgar Casey, of all people. I was actually done a show the other day on Edgar Casey, and a lot of the things that he might say a couple hundred years ago, definitely would have been taken as something heretical and you know, and something witchy. So it,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's strange how just different regions kind of interpret different stuff like that.
Yeah.
To me that's extremely strange. But it's so funny though that I guess the point was made of going, well, yeah, you best not cut down this one. So that's, to me, that's pretty interesting. Um, well, let me ask you. Like I said, we've touched a little bit on gargoyles and things like that. Is there some other stuff about the downtown that you think that should be mentioned, especially in the realm of the paranormal and stuff?
Well, the downtown area in Louisville has a number of supposedly haunted locations as well. But like I said, I specialize in the old Louisville area. That's the area immediately adjacent to the downtown. They say it's one of the largest Victorian neighborhoods in the country. You just have hundreds of old Victorian houses and mansions. They've been around, for 120, 30 years in most cases. 1880 to 1900 is when most of these houses were built. So you don't find a lot of cities that have this many old houses, in such a compact area.
Right.
And for the most part, these are solid brick and stone constructions.
Now,
a lot of people think because they're so solidly built, they kind of serve as energy traps, and things that have happened in the past, might have imprinted themselves. And they say you can't go more than half a block down in Old Louisville without there being a supposedly haunted house. So, we do tours of the neighborhood. We take people through every night and visit some of the most famous alleged haunts. So a lot of these are houses, but there's a haunted church or two. There's a phantom that roams one of the streets. There's all kinds of ghosts down in Old Louisville. So anyone who likes history and legends, ghost stories, Old Louisville's a great place. And a lot of people in Kentucky don't know too much about it. It's been an area that's kind of been overlooked, but the word's getting out. More and more people are coming. They're coming from all over the world, and they're saying it's going to be the new Savannah, the new Charleston. And it's funny, a lot of these legends, a lot of times they have a basis in fact. So, you talk about the witch's tree. The tornado of March 27th, 1890 did happen. It was a defining moment in Louisville history. There's lots of oral accounts of witches meeting at that spot. You can see old newspaper accounts about the voodoo people meeting there. Actually, around here they called it hoodoo. There was a famous hoodoo priestess by the name of Josephine who would meet her clients at the tree, and she would sell them potions, and they'd pay her to put curses on people, and she would make them gree bags and things like that for good luck. So I think that's fascinating. It's kind of like Savannah, people know about voodoo, and New Orleans and stuff, they know about voodoo. A lot of places across the country, have accounts of witches, and like you said, a lot of times these probably weren't even witches. Did witches really exist back then? Were they kind of satanic or pagan, nature worshippers, like some of them are today, or were they just marginalized women? These were, old women who knew how to work with herbs and cure people that way. They might have been alone and kind of became ostracized. So a lot of times, people dispute that there even was such a thing as witches. The stereotypical kind of witch might have just been an out-of-place woman who became a scapegoat in society. But I think it's fascinating. Old Louisville, does have its history of witches. It does have its history of voodoo. And in doing my research, something I thought is really fascinating is that there's a lot of gypsy history in Louisville as well. I was doing some research, and I found out that up until the 1920s, Louisville was like the gypsy capital of the United States. All the gypsy bands in this part of the country, they had their banks and their lawyers here in Louisville. And that was because, the gypsies very often, they're travelers. They travel with the warmer weather, to do work. And when it got warm in the spring, that's when they'd head up from the southern states, go up to the northern states looking for agricultural work, working with horses and things like that. And Louisville was halfway, between the south and the north. So for 2 weeks around Easter, they would camp out along the river, and there'd be thousands of gypsies and like the painted wagons, and a lot of them in typical gypsy attire. They'd roast turkeys and pigs and cows along the river those areas, and that brought them back through Louisville about halfway down, and that would bring them down around Thanksgiving. So around Thanksgiving, they camp out along the river again for 2 weeks, and they'd have their harvest celebrations. And the same thing, they'd have roast oxen and turkeys, and they'd have parties. And I think it was in the 30s, there was supposed to be a big kind of royal wedding. One of the I think it was the Philadelphia clan. There was a gypsy king. His name was Prince Hendrik, and he was to marry the princess of the Chicago clan, and they decided to have their wedding in Louisville because that was kind of midway. But something happened. They had a fight with the police. They ended up leaving. No one knows if they ever got married or not. But around that time, a lot of the other gypsies left because they felt like they were being discriminated against by the police. And then after the 30s, you didn't see them here like you did before, but it used to be twice a year. There'd be big gypsy gatherings along the Ohio River in Louisville. I think that's really fascinating. A lot of people know nothing about that.
Yeah, well, I remember back in, good Lord, like back in the middle 70s, sometimes, they would come through, a very odd occasion. I think I might have seen them once or twice, and like you said, just big, long kind of caravan of vehicles and whatnot going. I don't know if they were going down toward Memphis area or whatever, but they're definitely going kind of eastern Tennessee and down sort of direction. And it was one of those sort of things. It was really quirky because we have like a lot of like Mennonite people here and things like that. So it's just a different vibe, a different culture, and different lifestyle and stuff. And it was like you said, it stood out. And which like you said, because as soon as you were talking about, there was a curse put on them, I was like, oh, okay, this sounds like a gypsy thing, something out of the werewolf movie or something. But that's really strange. Is there any sort of group there at all or anymore? Or they pretty much just left Louisville altogether?
Well, what happens is a lot of them eventually just settle down. So there's like gypsies that just live here. They just have their houses now. Some do travel around. I met a woman who her family still traveled around like they used to, and 2 or 3 times a year they'd end up passing through Louisville, and she always had her spots that she would visit when she was back in town, and that's how I met her. I was at the Witch's Tree one night, and she said every time she was in town she came and left something on the tree for the witches. So some of them live here down where Churchill Downs is along Central Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of gypsies settled there, and in the 60s and 70s they had a lot of like fortune tellers in that area, and even today there's some gypsy families that still live out that area.
Wow, it's strange how much rich history is there, and how much is because like you said, a lot of people in this area, a lot of people, if you're a sports person here, it's like a religion. Like it's UK and U of L rivalry. It's like, it's serious.
Yeah.
They take it seriously, and I'm like, guys, lighten up. But there's people, I'm telling you, that like bleed blue here. They're that hardcore about it, and not to get really into sports and stuff, but but then it'd be like, okay, well, hey, Louisville won. That's great. Against another team, they're still a Kentucky team. So no, it's got to be UK. I'm like, I don't get it. So it's so funny how there's that division. But like I said, most people don't get past that rivalry to really know. I don't know what it is. I think it's a regional thing, and there's nothing wrong with being proud of your region and all that and stuff. But like I said, there's so much going on in Kentucky that people don't realize. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in West Kentucky that people don't think about. Just because most people, like you were talking about hauntings and stuff, they'll think of Kentucky, they'll think of Waverly, because that gets so much press. And as I was telling you, I was talking with Jerry from the Hillbilly Horror Story show, and he was like, yeah, you need to come up, man, this and that. I'll show you down here and kind of show you the crawl, and we go down, down Maine and all this and that. And now, as I kind of mentioned a little bit before, like about like the Pink Palace. Now, is still in that same area?
Yeah, the Pink Palace is a landmark on St. James Court, and St. James Court is the heart of old Louisville. It's a beautiful residential neighborhood that was modeled after London neighborhoods, and it was built on the site of the old Southern Exposition. And the Southern Exposition was a kind of early World's Fair that Louisville hosted in the 1880s. It opened on August 1st, 1881. August 1st, 1883. And where St. James Court is, back in the day, that was out in the country. That wasn't really part of the city. And on that spot, they built this massive wooden building. It measured 600 by 900 square feet. They said it was the largest wooden building at the time in the world. And it's where they housed all these exhibits, all these events for the Southern Exposition. And the Southern Exposition put Louisville and Kentucky on the map. It was only supposed to last for 100 days. It went for 5 years, though. And during that time, Louisville more than doubled in size. And so that whole area to the south of the downtown area became annexed. It was developed into neighborhoods for all the people moving here because of the Southern Exposition. And so it's really what made the neighborhood. And on the spot where the building stood, where they built St. James Court, one of the first buildings they built was a red brick building. When it was built in 1890, it was known as the St. James Court Gentlemen's Club and Casino. And it's where the local men would gather. They'd have a snifter of bourbon. They'd smoke a locally rolled cigar. They might go have a hand of poker in one of the game rooms. If they went upstairs, they might do other things because there were little rooms with ladies up there waiting. So it was a brothel as well. And that was kind of typical back then. That place didn't last too long as a brothel. Within a couple of years, the Gentlemen's Club packed up and moved out. And then a family moved in, the family of Benjamin Franklin Avery, and they lived there. They turned it into a home. They had it till about 1910. After they moved out, the building eventually became headquarters for the WCTU in Kentucky. WCTU, Women's Christian Temperance Union. They were the driving force behind Prohibition. They were against drinking, and they're still around today fighting the good fight. They were also against gambling, smoking, and above all, prostitution. So all the things that were going on in the Gentlemen's Club that they didn't know about, suppose when they found out what had happened in that terrible red brick den of iniquity, they were so scandalized they painted the red brick building pink as a way of kind of wiping the slate clean and giving the building a new lease on life. And that's how it got its pink paint job and how it became known as the Pink Palace. And it's haunted. They say the ghost of Avery, the man who lived there early on, haunts the place today. He shows up in times of danger. He's what in the paranormal world they call a crisis apparition, a ghost or a spirit who is kind of a harbinger. He makes an appearance when people are in danger, so he's like a warning. He lets them know something bad is about to happen. And throughout the years, he's been seen on various occasions, always right, just seconds or minutes before something bad is about to happen, and talked to people who lived there before who said he saved them, from a burglar and from a fire on one occasion. And it was recently on the market. You could have bought it if you wanted, but now I think it's off the market. It's a single-family house. It's a beautiful house, but if you go down to St. James Court, it's definitely one of the places you notice right away. It's on the south end. It's one of the anchors there by Belgravia Court. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, and that was so crazy that you were talking about how basically it went from a gentleman's club and stuff, and it's so funny how like so many things in especially the South, because we don't get rid of a lot. We reuse things. Slice of bread 4 ways, and it's so funny how these things have had so much life, and because the buildings are so old. I mean, if you believe in resonance and vibrational memory and objects and things like that, it would make sense that something like that would be still going on there. I mean, I know whenever I would research hauntings or whatever, which I don't even say what I might have encountered or other people have encountered are ghosts. I just go, look, this is what they reported seeing, this is the phenomena they felt or they experienced, and this sounds closer to maybe a residual haunting, or this sounds more like you said, like a harbinger type of a spirit, a kind of a Mothman character or something like that. But the thing is too, you have also got to travel out of the U.S. and check other cultures and stuff. How would you rate, or how would you compare, say, Louisville as opposed to, say, other regions that have like full-on like Days of the Dead and things like that? Or does Louisville is it getting more diverse where it's having more things like that now?
I think in the South, people are just more prone to tell stories and when you're telling stories, ghost stories often pop up. So I don't know if it's that much different than a lot of places, but Kentucky's got such a unique history. It's a very identifiable state. There's the bourbon barons that made the state. There's the titans of tobacco, the racetrack royalty. Drinking, smoking, gambling. Made cities like Louisville. So I think when you got the vices there, it kind of lends itself to scandal, and scandal is great for stories. So the fact that we do have a history of supposed witches and voodoo people and gypsy people. I don't know much about werewolves or vampires in Louisville, but we got everything else. So I think we can maybe compete with Ireland. Places that are famous for their ghosts and their hauntings, or Scotland.
Well, it seems like just so many people from those type of areas, settled in Appalachian parts and slowly filtered in here and brought their culture and their oral histories. And I was going to say, what was the old saying? No great adventure ever started with a glass of milk. There's always something connected to a bar or a pub or some sort of place, a sort of entertainment or whatever, and because it brings in so many different elements, good and bad, and you have all those different conflicting emotions and conflicting situations and all that. And which now I knew that places like obviously like New Orleans and stuff, which Louisville areas of that to me has sort of a New Orleans feel to it, and it seems like witch culture and vampire culture, and I'm talking living people who feel that they are vampires, or because there's all kinds of different stuff. People out there think that vampires only drink blood, and there's people that drain energy from each other and willfully and give it up and stuff like that, and have sort of a symbiotic relationship with a vampire and a host, and it can get kind of deep. But it does seem like it's more welcoming to that, which I think is why a lot of people in this area kind of come to that, because like you said, it used to be like you would have to go to Chicago or San Francisco or maybe Atlanta, somewhere like that, to have more of an open culture and be able to kind of be yourself and explore different aspects of your personality and things like that. But it really seems like Louisville is stepping up to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And Louisville is one of those places where people are, let's keep Louisville weird. People are proud of their eccentric side and their legends and stories. They like that quirkiness. They like those eccentric characters. So kind of all ties in together, I think.
Right, and like you said, that's the lifeblood of any town. Every town has that, but like you said, there's a few towns that really accentuate that and put that to the forefront, and kind of I don't know, really kind of shine a light on it as like, hey, this is something that should be fostered. Let me ask you something too real quick. We got a little bit of time left. Is there any projects that you've got coming up you want to talk about? Any new books, appearances, conventions, anything like that?
Well, as far as book signings, if you go to my website, daviddomine.com, I give a schedule of book signings and appearances. We do, Louisville, we do tours based on my book. So from March 15th to November 15th, every night at 7:30, we have a guided walking tour of America's most haunted neighborhood. And if I'm available, I'll come down and lead the group myself. But I have tour guides who help me during the day. We do history and architecture tours. So we do these tours 7 days a week for 8 months straight. And if you go to our website, LouisvilleHistoricTours.com, you can find out more, about those tours. You can buy tickets and stuff. But I'm working on a true crime book about a grisly murder that took place in old Louisville just several years ago. There was a house on 4th Street just right around the corner from the Pink Palace. And it was the evening of June 17th, 2010. The police were called to a big mansion. Two guys living there were having kind of a lover's quarrel, and one was trying to break into the bedroom and kill the other one. And in the process, when the police came and arrested them, one of them ratted out the other and said there was a body buried down in the basement in the wine cellar. They didn't really believe it, but they went down and started today, and sure enough, 4 feet below the surface of the floor, because it was a dirt floor in the wine cellar, they found a blue Rubbermaid container, and it the remains of Jamie Carroll, someone from eastern Kentucky who had been shot and stabbed. They used a sledgehammer to fit his body into the container. And 3 years later, we had this scandalous murder trial. It was called the trial of He Said, He Said. And the mystery was what happened that night. It was kind of a bizarre lover's triangle, you could say. But I'm writing kind of the book about the case. I sat in on the murder trials. It was really fascinating. Turns out the house at one time was a sanatorium in the 20s, 30s, 40s. Other people had been killed there, and the two guys living there had interesting histories. So there's all this bizarre stuff. When the details of the murder came out, they started calling this Kentucky's American Horror Story, because that year, that was the first season of American Horror Story when the murder was found out. And as the details of this real-life murder came out, it kind of mimicked what was happening on the TV show. And so you can actually watch this because it's been on national TV. The night that the two guys had the fight and called the police, there was a camera crew in town following the Louisville police around for a show on A&E called The First 48. So you can actually see this on The First 48. It's the episode that's called What Lies Beneath. A&E then did a special follow-up show about this murder. They said it was their most bizarre murder at the time, and they did a 2-hour special on After the First 48 on investigation. Discovery Hell House did a show on it. It was called House of Lost Souls, Deadly Sins. They did a show on it. That episode was called Bogus Bills. So there's like 5 different national shows that have done that house now. So if you go to my website, once again, it was daviddomine.com. So DavidDomine.com. I've got links to like the TV shows that have done it, and I give progress about the book. And this is the year I'm hoping to get the book done. So that's my big project right now, and I got to get finished.
Wow, yeah, that sounds involved. I know, like you said, people don't get how much more there is to doing a book. It's not just setting and slamming it out. I mean, there's so much research, and there's so much double checking, triple checking, and then you may be halfway through it, and then a new development comes up, and then you have to revise what you've already written or take out an element that found out to be a false lead, and you know, yeah. Especially when you're dealing with real life stuff, you got to really have your facts straight, and it's tricky. I do wonder though, and this is just, you know, being raised up on like True Detective magazines and stuff like that. My mom was like a big nut for that. I wonder why they used a tote. Why didn't they, with it being Earth, I don't know why they didn't just put lye or something. I figured it would have broke the body down quicker.
I think they were maybe they were thinking about moving it at one time. They wanted to contain it, you know.
So that way they take their evidence with them. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think they might have been thinking about dumping it someplace else at first. And they filled the whole thing with lye, so right. You know, having it in a container probably made it easier to do that.
That's weird. You know, did they ever figure out if it was a thing of, was it like kind of like a thrill killing, or was it like just some situation went sideways, this happened, and they said we've got to get rid of the bodies, so let's take them downstairs? Or
well, the prosecution argued that so the two accused were Jeffrey Munt and Joey Manis. They were living in the big mansion. They were having some financial problems. Jamie Carroll, the guy they killed, was their drug dealer, and he had shown up that night. He had lots of cash on him. Supposedly they concocted the scheme to kill him, keep his drugs and money, and pay some bills for a while because they were having some financial problems. That's what the prosecution argued in both of the cases. During the first case, Joey Manis's case, the defense never came out and said it, but you could tell they were trying to plant in the minds of the jurors that Jeffrey Munt, his like ultimate high would have been killing someone during sex, and this was kind of a, you know, there was a sexual situation at first with all 3 of them, so they were trying to kind of spin it that way. You could tell that maybe it was a thrill killing.
So did it ever like jump off? Not giving out too many details, obviously. I mean, did it ever jump off into sort of a Dahmer direction? You know, I mean, did they, didn't try to make this guy into like a mindless sex zombie or something like that? I mean, they went ahead and full on killed the guy, right?
I'm not sure, but the thing is, each one accused the other of actually killing him, and yeah, no one. That's the thing. That's the big mystery. What happened that night? Why did they call the police? First off, and when his body was found, his body had been there like for 9 months in the ground. So what actually happened the night of the murder? That's a whole nother thing. Two big mysteries, and neither of them have talked to me, so I haven't been able to get firsthand accounts from either of them. All I've got is what was said during the trials and stuff.
Man, murder in the naked city. I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, see, now I had went up through that area. I'd worked in corrections for years and stuff, and had to do training and stuff, around like Shelby Hall and things like that, and had been through there, but I'd never realized the sort of history and just all the kind of underbelly to all that, which, being from a small town, of course, you're like, it's the city, beware the city, when you're growing up as a kid, your mom and dad always warned you, stay with the city, boy, but there's a lot of beauty, but there's also a lot of horror, just, I guess, like a lot of big places like that.
Yeah. And if anyone read the book by John Barron or saw the movie Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil about Savannah, that's kind of my inspiration for this story. He basically took Savannah and made it famous. It wasn't so much the grisly murder he was writing about, it was the quirky people, the beautiful old mansions, the old money, the seedy underbelly, of the community. I think that's what really captivates people.
Right. Well, I mean, because anyone can do a quick shock and horror type situation, but pretty much any situation, you're going to see the blood drop from the wound. It originates from something culminated for that moment to happen. A lot of stuff has to fall in line for something like that to happen, and it's funny because the way that you seem to do it is on a higher end than what I like to try to do is, here's an event. That's great, but what's the ripple effect? How does it affect this community? How does it affect this and that? And like you said, what things fell into place to make it happen? And that to me is where the richer story lies. And
yeah, it's more than just the murder. There's a lot. There's backstory. There's how it affected the community. It's how it affected me. Because I was living there at the time. I was right on the corner from where I was living, and it was a neighborhood I wrote about. So yeah, it has a lot of different angles.
My gosh. Well, listen, David. Give me your website one more time, and I'm going to begin to do this fade out music. If you don't mind.
Yeah, find out about me at daviddomine.com. So DavidDomine.com. Find out about my tours at LouisvilleHistoricTours.com. LouisvilleHistoricTours.com. We do tours March 15th through November 15th, 7 days a week. In the evening, we have our haunted history walk. And the afternoon and mornings, we have history and architecture tours. It's a beautiful neighborhood.
Awesome. David, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you being here. And I do want to thank everybody. Definitely, I want to touch base when this book is back out again.
Yeah, we'll talk later.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. I want you to enjoy the rest of your day. But as the sun settles and the shadows grow long, I want you to check your closets, check under your bed. You never know, there may be a gargoyle under there. God knows what. But above all, I want you to love yourselves, love each other, and don't forget to take a little time out, to stay scared, and don't be afraid to peel back the skin and look what lies beneath. Take care. God bless.